the eruption that changed the world. In the Indonesian archipelago, there's a volcano in between the islands of Sumatra and Java. This mountain is called Mount Krakatoa, which means the fire mountain. It erupts every 200 years and regrows again. This volcano erupted in the year 535, 850, 950, 1050, 1150, 1320, 1520, 1680, 1886, and 2020. The eruption I'll be focusing on today is the 535 AD explosion. This eruption took place near the end of the year 535. This eruption began a chain of events that changed the world. First, we'll start at the source. Indonesia at this time was filled with multiple kingdoms and people groups. I know I'm gonna butcher this next part, but just bear with me here. We have the Surajava Empire, the Toramangalia Kingdom, and the Kalinga Kingdom, which are all the closest civilizations to Mount Krakatoa. A first-hand account of the explosion comes from the Javanese Book of Kings, which is the Pashtuka Raja, and it records that in the year 338 Saka, or 4 AD, the eruption occurred. A thundering sound was heard from Mount Batwara, which was answered by a similar noise from Kapi, laying westward of modern Batam. A great glowing fire, which reached the sky, came out of the last named mountain. The whole world was greatly shaken, and violent thundering accompanied with heavy rain and storms took place. But not only did the heavy rain extinguish the eruption of the fire of the Mount Kapi, but augmented the fire. The noise was so fearful. At last, the mountain Kapi, with a tremendous roar, burst into pieces and sank into the deepest part of the earth. The water of the sea rose and inducted the land. The country to the east of Mount Batwara to the mountain Rajabasa was inducted by the sea. The inhabitants of the northern part of Sunda country to the Mount Rajabasa were drowned and swept away with all property. The water subsided, but the land on which Kapi stood became sea, and Java and Sumatra were divided into two parts. That's the end of the excerpt. However, historians today classify that this date could be wrong, and is talking about the 535 AD event. Moving eastwards, the emperor of the Liang dynasty in China heard a huge boom. What could that sound have been? Mount Krakatoa's eruption was heard all the way to China. This put fear into the hearts of the Chinese, especially since volcanic ash covered the sky, rendering the Canopus star constellation dim and unable to be seen by the naked eye. This constellation meant good times for the new year, but only if they can see it. So the following year in 536 AD, in July and August, the Nachi Chronicle says, yellow dust fell like snow, and you could pick it up in the scoops. Historians think this yellow dust could be the Gobi sand from the Gobi Desert. This sand also ruined crops. This caused ruined crops in the year 537 AD, and snow fell in August. Moving to northern China, which had just broken up from the Northern Wei dynasty into the Eastern and Western Wei dynasty. In the capital, Shenyang, the government ordered people to bury corpses, which, because of the drought, caused famine. The emperor also ordered all taxes to not be taken at this time. Sadly, this did not help the Great Famine, which killed 70 to 80% of the population. People were so desperate they resorted to cannibalism. Traveling a bit north of ancient Mongolia, surprisingly there's nothing to do with Mongolians in this area. This area was populated by the Turkic tribes and the Avar Empire, which would be the stem of the Hungarian and Turkic rivalries. The Avar people had a strong empire, which had the most advanced weaponry in the world. They were masters of the horse, making their armies all the more deadly. However, mysteriously, their empire collapsed. How? Climate change due to the 535 AD explosion. Tree records in Siberia show that Central Asia at this point was very cold and dry. And horses cannot live in such environments. They need healthy grass, not dry, unhealthy grass. This led to the Avar's horse to die off, making their military effectively gone. This gave the Turkic tribes an idea to overthrow their Avar overlords. Since the Turkic people have cows instead of horses, they were not in a technological disadvantage, allowing them to revolt against the Avars and send them away from the steppes of Mongolia. Traveling 4,000 miles, the Avars started conquering different lands until they met the Byzantines. The Byzantines paid off the Avars with gold, which can be seen in the Carpathian Mountains in modern-day Hungary. Around this time, the Byzantines were substantially weaker. This is because of a version of a bubonic plague that was spreading around the Byzantines. This plague was caused by flies. When weather is colder, the fly's guts become clogged. This causes an effect where the fly never actually becomes full. So they start sucking human blood, spreading bacteria, and starting the plague. This indirectly started the Middle Ages in Europe. The Palestinian historian Properus of Cyrene wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during the whole year. In Africa, there wasn't much written down. However, scientists found volcanic pumice washed up on the east coast of Africa. While in South Africa, a plethora of tsunamis hit the coast, killing lots of victims. The pyroclastic flows displaced water levels around the ocean during this time. In ancient Mesoamerica, the Tenochtitlan civilization was at its peak, with a sprawling metropolitan city called by the civilization's name. They had huge pyramids, ballparks, and shopping centers. However, in 535, this civilization collapsed. The Krakatoa explosion led to a drought in the Americas. The evidence shows in tree ring examinations from California and Chile, while in Colombia, rivers were drying up. This drought caused crop failures, and lack of water hindered sanitation. The population was starving and disease was spreading. 70% of the population under the age of 25 were dying. Babies were growing up sick and dying as scientists examined bones during that period. After the priests failed to attempt to gain the gods' approval for rain, the commoners revolted. They had burned buildings, destroyed temples, and all that was left was the ruins of the city. And there is no new civilization in Mesopotamia for the next 300 years. Our final stop in this global tour is in Southeast Asia, where it all began. There are three groups of people: the Orang-Laut, the Moken, and the Baoju. Historians gave them the term the Sea Gypsy culture. As the Krakatoa eruption began, these people escaped. They slowly merged to become one group of people called the Lapita. They were the ancestors of the modern-day Polynesians. The Lapita traveled to modern-day Papua New Guinea, which during this time was under Melanesian control. After that pit stop, the Lapita traveled across the Pacific. The Polynesian mitochondrial DNA comprises of 5% from the Melanesian people groups. It could be a sign that the Lapita people did not really assimilate that much to the Melanesian people. The Lapita people traveled across the Pacific, jumping from island to island, taking small breaks and building their culture. They even landed on the island Rapa Nui, or Easter Island. Some historians believe that the Polynesians even made it to South America due to the introduction of sweet potatoes, which originally came from South America. Krakatoa truly changed the world, from cultural changes, migrations, environmental devastations, etc. This supervolcano in Indonesia pushed humanity from the ancient world to the Middle Ages, beginning a new era in human history.